Welcome to Audi's Tech Talk Green Technology. We're delighted to have you with us today, and we're delighted to hear from you in your questions at the end of the show. Now, Audi is driving green. That's the aim, both off production line as well as on the road. Now, at the last Tech Talk, when it was all about carbon neutrality, we already looked at what Audi is doing to make sure that the car carries the smallest possible carbon rucksack as it reaches its customer. But of course, climate protection is more than CO2 reduction, and that's why today we will be looking at environmental projects at Audi that are taking it one step further, both in mind and action, so that our future remains worth living. Now, Audi calls this the vision positive impact. May sound abstract, true, but today we're filling this with life. And to this end, we're taking a look at the entire life cycle of the cars, and are starting now with the use phase, because here we've got news to tell you. And of course, nobody less than Oliver Hoffmann, our new board member for technical development, will talk you through them. Let's have a look where we met. This is an almost magical place here where we are today, because this is where customers pick up their Audis with a real smile on their face. And it's also, of course, the perfect place to chat with our new board member responsible for technical management, how Audi is really heading into a green future. So what is Audi doing concretely so that customers can really drive in a green fashion? Well, first of all, we're focusing on our products, which means the efficiency of the cars is to be increased, the aerodynamics, a very clever aerodynamic CD rating, so that, drag resistance is brought down to make sure it's a very efficient driving car. In the product development, we are looking very early on at the recycling product process, so that we have a circular economy. And further to that, of course, we also have offers already on the plate today for our customers, so they can power their cars with green fuels, with green power. For example, if you charge at home, we work together with Eli, for example, or with the high power charging capacity on motorways. That means we're doing this with our partner Ionity, but of course that's not enough for us because green electric power is not available nationwide yet. And therefore, we are cooperating with partners, first of all in Europe, to make sure that we can provide green power wherever you go for our customers. Which means the big news is really the partnership with utility suppliers. So what really is at the back of these corporations? Well, together with the utility industry, we're trying to ramp up the offer of wind and solar energy. So by 2025, we want to be able to offer 5 terawatt-hour of electric capacity, and that way to have our fleet in Europe drive carbon neutral on balance. Do not forget, we're only at the start of our electrification strategy, which means with the e-tron family, with the e-tron GT and our latest product, the Q4 e-tron, we're really very much in the infancy. And by 2025, we will have well over 25 fully electric products. So the aim is the green Audi electric fleet by 2025. Now, that's in a mere 4 years, so pretty soon. Absolutely, of course, yes. And that's why we're working with our cooperation partner, that's RWE, utility provider, with our first project, so that in the state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, we will have a solar park together set up with RWE next year already, 2022, and it will become the biggest independent solar park of Germany, with over 420,000 solar modules. And we're really putting metal to the pedal there. Okay, you're starting in Germany, but how do you continue? Well, obviously, in Europe, that's where we will work with utility electricity suppliers. I just mentioned the project with RWE, but others will follow. But for us, it's equally clear that we will pan this out into other regions. Obviously, the target for us is to be carbon neutral on balance sheet in the way the mobility we can offer. Thanks, Oliver. Green outlooks there. All the success for you on that part. Thank you very much. So much on the news from Oliver Hoffmann, our new board member responsible for technical development. And, of course, how Audi is going to promote renewable energies. But, of course, it's not just a matter of making sure the car will drive in a green fashion on the road, but that the cars are also produced in a sustainable manner. That's why our next focal point will be on the procurement stage. How do we manage to avoid CO2 and to make sure we really use resources most sparingly? And for this, we've got Johanna Klevers here on board. She is team manager when it comes to sustainability in the supply chain. Hello, Johanna. Now, sustainable values along the supply chain, that is a huge challenge. And of course, it's also something that everybody keeps talking about. So how do you manage as a team to make sure that all suppliers will act in a sustainable fashion? Well, the first principle is we work with suppliers, we want to work with them who share our values, meaning who will bring tangible results for people and the environment and also in the supply chain. And that's why in 2019, we defined a binding commissioning criteria, the S rating, which makes sure that our suppliers are judged by environmental social compliance criteria, which means our requirements are integrated into the processes of sussing out the suppliers, and we have to do everything to detect risks early on. Sounds like a lot of work. Is digitalization also an enabler for you here? Well, indeed. Information which, for example, we receive from a sustainability rating about the sustainable work of our suppliers is used in a targeted fashion to make sure that we can really assess the sustainable achievement in the supply chains. So for us, digitization is an enabler, and we use artificial intelligence as a risk radar. With artificial intelligence, we screen external sources, for example, media, in well over 150 different countries and 150 languages to assess predefined risk fields, which once again are defined from the sustainability rating and the code of conduct for business partners. Which means we can detect a lot earlier potential risks and can take active countermeasures, for example, by having strategic dialogues with the suppliers or train-the-trainer formats to make sure that our requirements are really penetrating deep into the supply chain. Well, tell us how you use AI in the supply chain. Maybe you've got a few examples. Well, together with Volkswagen and Porsche, we're using a so-called sustainability radar. It's based on an algorithm of a company called Pre-Wave. So here we're looking at external sources to assess risks. For example, when we take a look at the social field, we'll look at work legal developments or issues like discrimination at the workplace. In the environmental field, it's information from public sources that we use, for example, when it's all about water consumption. Well, tell us a little more about the background. What do you also do with the suppliers to make sure that they really produce and act consistently sustainable? But one example is the Audi CO2 program, which we set up in 2018 together with suppliers. Because, of course, our supplier companies are equally ambitious and have already started out long ago to get things going. So in this Audi CO2 program in the supply chain, we've got workshop formats to work together with suppliers to really have a common ground understanding. What's the CO2 hotspots? What's the measures that make sense that we can implement on which supplier, on which tier level to make sure that carbon in the supply chain can be effectively reduced. In 2021, for example, we managed, as a result from the Audi CO2 program in the supply chain, saved over 330,000 tons of CO2 on balance sheet because, for example, we require that the cell production green energy is being used. Or we've got the aluminium closed loop that we've got in the press shops of Audi. And we're also using more and more recycled material where it makes sense. Well, let's take that up, the issue of recycled material. What is Audi doing here? Well, the aim is to save commodities and resources, to avoid primary commodities being used, and that means you need intelligent closed loops. And we wanted to understand how can you take plastic from a car and how can you feed that into an intelligent loop. And here we looked at chemical recycling together with scientists from the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. We looked at it as part of the think tank Intelligent Resource Strategies in a pilot project to understand how can you take these car plastics and refeed them into such an intelligent circle. You've actually talked about this at the last Tech Talk. Now, quite a lot has happened in this pilot project over the last 10 months. Can you tell us more? Well, yes. We've got plastic components that are no longer used from Audi models, for example, here like a wheel trim or, for example, petrol tanks, and we used them from the German supplier network, and they were then made into pyrolysis oil in that chemical recycling process, because we want to understand what are the economic and ecological benefits of that process over an energetic reusing of car plastics. And to this end, we've got Rebecca Falk invited here to speak to us live from the KIT. Hello, Rebecca, to you. Hello. Can you tell us maybe what, from the perspective of the scientist, has happened over the last few months and what were the key results thereof? Well, in the last months, we have seen from the pyrolysis tests and the material that we used from Audi's dealerships has shown us that in a first assessment, chemical recycling, when you compare it to energetic utilization, is on an economic and ecological comparison, well, on a par. On a par to crude oil, can even be superior to the use of crude oil. When it comes to the costs, that's in the economic assessment, we have found that the costs for chemical recycling are on a level of the contributions required for an energetic utilization. Now, with the carbon dioxide, which in the chemical recycling can also be kept in the loop by and large, we have seen that, well, fossil fuels can be used over an extended period of time through that loop, and that means the purchasing of additional fossil fuels can be reduced. As far as carbon dioxide emissions is concerned, we have seen that in chemical recycling, well, the CO2 emissions are substantially lower than in the current energetic utilization, which of course benefits the climate. Which means costs are being saved and the environment is protected. So what was the concrete step? What kind of methodology did you use? Well, first of all, we shredded the material, and then in a pyrolysis, we made sure that we were able to chemically analyze the result of the pyrolysis and to make, well, first gauges and analysis, and to see what about energy savings, emission savings, and costs. And compared to mechanical recycling, pyrolysis will take the various plastics and will convert them at a high temperature into what we call a pyrolysis oil. This pyrolysis oil is nothing else but chemical fuel, which after another reutilization process, a redefining process, can be used in conventional industrial processes and can also be reworked into new plastic materials. That means primary commodities like crude oil can be replaced, and chemical recycling thus offers a viable alternative to the energetic utilization we see at the moment and supplements mechanical reutilization. Sounds like a win-win situation for both the environment and the industry. Now, Johanna, what is the next step for you? Well, in the next step, we will take a look at these first findings and will then drill them deeper in further research work. And in a follow-up project, we also want to understand what about the scalability of these procedures. Because, of course, there's one thing to make sure, well, we've got a higher share of recycled materials in our cars, but of course, we also have to look at the availability of recycled materials on the market. And here we want to understand, through further such projects, what role can we play from procurement here in the collaboration with the partners? So that means Audi's not just doing this to meet a quota, but to really move something in the market. Well, thanks to Johanna. Thanks to Rebecca as well. And we will see each other in a second in the Q&A session. To prevent waste, that is the most urgent approach. But of course, a lot is already, well, to be found in our valuable environment. Is that not our problem? Oh, no. That's not what we do and think at Audi. Where the waste, microplastics, wear and tear, dust, Audi is taking its responsibility and is taking a proactive approach with projects and corporations which we'll introduce in the following. So welcome with me, Rüdiger Recknagel. He is the environmental officer at Audi and has been so for well over 5 years. And he's managing director of the Audi Environment Foundation. Well, Rüdiger, everybody who knows you a little knows that environmental protection is something that's very close to your heart. It doesn't just stop with the car and its production, is that right? You're right. Protection of the environment is close to my heart, but of course it's equally important to Audi. And that's why Audi, 12 years ago, started this environmental foundation. It's a non-profit foundation to make sure that technology, new technologies, science and research can help us to improve the environment. What Audi stands for, Vorsprung durch Technik, is something we also implement in our environmental foundation for the benefit of the environment. Now, what does that mean with plastic waste? Well, you have to imagine that every person per week through the food he eats, he takes in about 5 grams of plastic. That's 1 credit card in weight. He takes it up, he consumes it, which means plastics are becoming more and more important. And that's why we've got Daniel Fenhaus from the Technical University in Berlin, whom we supported with his project Urban Filter. We've got him live online here. Hello, Daniel. Hello, good to hear you. Now, Daniel, we'd like to hear from you what you will be telling us. What about this project that your environmental foundation is supporting, and how does this Urban Filter actually work? Well, in the Urban Filter project, we will, with a modular filter system, try for the first time that its intelligent system assess the intake of toxic substances from the public roads into our waterways. Now, the modules we've developed to this end can, depending on the intake area of the sewer, make sure that we retain, for example, plastics, packaging, wear and tear from tires, or cigarette stubs, or even foliage. Further to that, this interlinked concept that I mentioned shall, for example, take in weather information, traffic information, and also when the roads are being cleaned, to combine all that the waste and soiling of the tarmac is already recorded before it actually is washed into the sewer with the rain. Now, I'd say this is best explained if you have a look at this little animation. In a city, you have hotspots which you have to distinguish. You can see them here marked in blue. There's a junction in an inner city area, a residential area, or an industrial site. They have quite different needs and requirements to our filter concept. Soil comes from waste, from traffic, but also from organic loads, for example, plants in the vicinity. To this end, we've developed 9 different modules here for the levels of the road, the manhole, and for the sewer. They can all be fitted along the side of the road. And here, at different rain downpour, you will have different particles being retained and separated. In this animation, you see that at first, here nicely to be seen, how the rain downpour enters here the porous tarmac structure and then is fed towards the sewer middle, and here already the finest particles can be retained. In the middle section, in that filter, rougher particles will be retained, and the entire water flow is then fed forward to the lower section of the manhole, where, with our new magnetic module, particularly fine and particularly mobile particles can also be retained on top. Together, we can thus make sure that with a society that is sensitized to this, and innovative filter technology, intelligent usage of data, we can protect our water and riverways. Well, thanks, Daniel, for that explanation. Rüdiger, to you the question, how did you come up with this cooperation between the Technical University in Berlin and the Audi Environmental Foundation? Well, first of all, we realized that microplastics is vitally important. It's not just the macro, the big plastic everyone can see. And we can see with Daniel, or we heard of him, he was the very first one who looked at the filtering in sewer systems and wastewater systems. And also because you've got a very complex and interlinked systems of a number of different modules to really master this complex issue. That was the reason for us that we really wanted to promote his project. One more question to both of you. What's the next step with the filter? Well, from us, the next step will mean that in the next few months, we will take these modules, build them as prototypes, and have them fitted at the Technical University in Berlin. We will test them. And there, we will have different solids, toxic loads that will be, so to say, fed into them with different rain downpours, simply to assess how good is the retention capacity of the modules at the various sites. Well, Daniel, the exciting thing of this will, of course, be how can we manage that on the road your complex and interlinked modules can do what they're supposed to do. I'm really looking forward to it. Well, thanks to Berlin. We'll see you in a second in the Q&A session. But Rüdiger, a question to you now. The Audi Environmental Agency and Foundation has realized that plastic is a huge problem. About 70% of our planet is, of course, covered by water. And a lot of that water is already soiled with toxic plastic. Now, it's your aim to clean the waters. What other projects do you have? Well, another example for one of our big projects when it comes to plastics is our project with Clear Rivers, where we're trying to have waste traps in harbors and along rivers that plastic doesn't even enter the waterways and doesn't even enter the seas. We do this together with our Clear Water partner, and the first waste trap is fitted in Rotterdam, and we've got a plant in Brussels with that trap, and we are now also heading to Budapest. A second project, quite recent actually, only kicked off a few days ago, is our ship that you see there that was installed near Belgrade in Serbia and collected waste for 10 days and picked up over 12 tons of waste, 3 tons of plastics. There's over 100,000 PET bottles that we collected this way and that we want to reduce. Sounds like a lot, but of course it won't save the planet. So hand on your heart, what is the effect? What's the benefit of all this? You're quite right that a single action will not save the planet, but what we think is important, that in our activities we want to raise awareness. We want to stimulate people. We want to show the people that, look, this is an issue you have to take up. You have to know it's tricky, it's complex, but we will regularly have these blogging events, meaning we, well, for example, collect waste and, well, run around with this. That's what we call blogging. And a number of events where we simply try to animate people, chip in to get along, and to have that collected waste being reduced. Like, for example, plastic banks where you can collect them and throw them in, simply to raise the awareness for this. Everyone has to help. Everybody needs to chip in wherever they are. And therefore, it's important that we really bring along everybody. And that's the way we, for example, are engaged. And I think at this point, we can say thank you and say goodbye for, well, your attention to you on this important topic, because you saw that Audi is pursuing the vision of positive impact with all these corporations and projects that we've here just outlined to you. We are happy to have you on board and hope to see you soon. Stay healthy until then. Goodbye.